It was, in a similar vein, a young medical doctor named Joseph Warren. Perhaps you've heard of him. He was the head of the Public Safety Committee, and he was the head of the Massachusetts Provincial Congress. He stayed in Boston, easily the most dangerous era at that time in our country's history. That was the epicenter of trouble in Boston, but he chose to stay there because that's where the British were headquartered, and he wanted to lead the American opposition to the British. You should also know this about Joseph Warren. He was a father of 4 young children, and he was a widower. It was Warren who made the decision to send out Paul Revere on that fateful night to warn the good people of Concord that the British were coming. The British were coming. He was elected a major general, but he chose to fight as a volunteer private. Twice the British regulars attacked, and twice the Americans held their fire until the very end when the advancing regiments came upon the Americans when they were in close range. Then they decimated the British ranks and they forced them to fall back. But the Americans were short of powder, as you know, short of ammunition, as you know, short of reinforcements. The Americans then were overwhelmed on the third try by the British. The soldiers swarmed the redoubt. They stabbed with their bayonets, and later they found Joseph Warren's body lying below the bodies of his fellow countrymen. 3 months before this occurred, Joseph Warren spoke these powerful words to his friends. "Our streets are filled with armed men. Our harbor is crowded with ships of war. But these cannot intimidate us. Our liberty must be preserved. It is far dearer than life. No longer could we reflect with generous pride on the heroic actions of our American forefathers if we but for a moment entertain the thought of giving up our liberty. Our country is in danger, but not to be despaired of. Our enemies are numerous and powerful, but we have many friends determining to be free, and heaven and earth will aid the resolution. On you depend the fortunes of America. You are to decide the important question of which rest the happiness and liberty of millions yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves." Joseph Warren risked everything. He laid down that final full measure of his devotion for us because he chose greatness, not decline, for the United States. And every successive generation of Americans from the time of Levi Preston and Joseph Warren have had to make that decision. Will they choose decline for the United States, or will they choose greatness? In 1943, 67 years ago, just last week, 902 American young GI boys crossed the Atlantic Ocean on a World War II transport ship. They were one of 3 ships in a convoy. They were 100 miles west off of Greenland. It was 1 o'clock in the morning when a periscope came up out of the waters. It belonged to a Nazi German submarine. The periscope took aim and it fired at the flank in the icy waters off the coast of Greenland. It hit the starboard side of the ship. Instantly, the explosion occurred. Young GIs, many of them were killed in a matter of seconds below deck. The power was knocked out. The radio was knocked out. As you can imagine, panic, chaos set in with these boys. Men jumped the ship into the few lifeboats that there were, some of them in life jackets. But on deck, there stood 4 chaplains. One was a Catholic priest, another a Jewish rabbi, 2 were Protestant. They were calm, they were courageous. They called to the young boys. Many were pleading, they were crying, they were praying, but the chaplains preached, "Courage, courage, men, courage." They opened a storage locker. They took out the remaining life jackets that they could find, and they handed them out, praying, saying courage, holding the hands of these young men, saying, "Put them on." They handed out the life jackets until there were more men than jackets. And wordlessly, the four chaplains removed their jackets and put them on the fearful, shaking bodies of the young GIs. Later witnesses recorded that the 4 chaplains took their arms and gathered around one another, and they held on to each other. It took less than 20 minutes from the time the torpedo hit the ship until the ship slid into the icy water. They held on to each other and they cried out to the young men, "Courage, boys, hold on." They prayed for the boys. They prayed for the survivors. And they prayed for those who were lost. And they prayed until the chaplains were no more. And of the 902 brave American GIs on board that night, 672 died. In one of the greatest acts of valor, the 4 chaplains demonstrated clearly what the Holy Scripture says to us. Greater man hath no love than this, but that he lay down his life for his friend. It is of this suffering and of this self-sacrifice that our nation was built upon. It was this that granted us our liberty. It was this that granted us our self-government. They chose greatness for us rather than decline. That is our history. That is the American story. And so I charge you again today, let us act with great courage, with that spirit of sacrifice, that spirit of nobility. As Joseph Warren said, act worthy of yourselves. And I thank you.